was a Thursday night like any other. I was sitting on my old, lumpy couch in my apartment in Austin, Texas. The room was quiet, just the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the sound of late-night sports highlights playing on the muted TV. A half-empty beer sat sweating on the table. My phone buzzed, lighting up with a number I didn't recognize. Probably a spam call. Or maybe another scam about my car's extended warranty. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, maybe boredom, maybe instinct, made me answer. "Hello?" I said, not expecting much. A teenage voice burst through the line, loud and angry. "It's me, Aiden. Your son. You left us, and now I'm stuck picking up the pieces. You think you can just disappear and act like you don't owe us anything? Pay my child support. You owe me. You owe Mom." My heart stopped. "Son?" I sat up straight, blood draining from my face. "What? Who are you?" I asked. But the kid kept going. Like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. For someone to blame. My brain couldn't catch up. My pulse thundered in my ears. There was no kid. I'd never had one. Right? And then he said her name. Michelle. And just like that, a name I hadn't heard in over a decade came roaring back like a storm I'd tried to outrun. My stomach twisted. My world tilted. He thought I was his father. He believed I abandoned him. He believed I destroyed his life. But the thing is, I never had a son, or so I thought. Thank you for staying through this roller coaster of truth, pain, and redemption. If this story hit you deep, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories that shake your soul. Comment if you've ever carried a burden that wasn't yours. Share this video, because someone out there needs to hear this. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is not to fight the past, but to stand in the truth and choose who he becomes next. I didn't know it yet, but my quiet night was about to explode. I'd just kicked off my shoes, the air conditioner humming in the background, and collapsed into the sunken groove of my couch. The TV droned on in the corner, something mindless, something familiar. After a long day, the silence felt earned. Peaceful, even. I leaned back, letting the cold neck of a beer bottle rest against my chest. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number. I squinted at the screen. Thought about ignoring it. But for some reason, I couldn't. Maybe it was the way the number lingered, like it needed to be answered. I let it ring once more before swiping the screen and raising it to my ear. "Hello?" There was a beat of silence. Then a voice, shaky, teenage, but forceful, cut through with zero warning. "I'm not playing around. You left us, and now you act like we don't exist. You owe child support. My school fees. Mom said you'd try to run from this, but you can't anymore." My heart stalled in my chest. "Who is this?" I asked, sitting up straighter. "It's Aiden. Your son, Brian. Stop pretending. I've had enough lies for one lifetime." The word hit like a hammer. "Son." I gripped the phone tighter. My jaw clenched. "You've got the wrong person," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I don't have a son." But the boy wasn't listening. His voice cracked as it climbed. "You think I don't know? You think I haven't seen the photos? Mom said you walked out the day she needed you most. You ruined her life. Mine too. You're just some deadbeat trying to disappear." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Every word was like a punch to the ribs. Sharp. Unrelenting. And more than anything, confusing as hell. I wasn't a father. I'd never had kids. No ex-wife ever mentioned a child. There were no paternity suits, no letters, no hints of this ever being real. But his voice. That voice didn't sound like a prank. It sounded wounded. Real. Honest in the most painful way. I'm not your Then he cut me off with the line that changed everything. "Michelle Evans. That's my mom. She told me everything. About how you disappeared. About how you chose your other life over us. She said you're Brian Mitchell and that you owe us 15 years of back pay. She said I should remind you." Suddenly, the room felt smaller. Hotter. Michelle. A name I hadn't heard in over a decade. A name I'd buried deep, shoved into the back closet of my past where I stored all the parts of myself I didn't want to look at. And now that closet was wide open and roaring. There was no way this was real. No way she had a kid, my kid. And yet, Aiden believed it. Every word. And I didn't know what to believe anymore. Before I could say another word, the line went dead. Just like that, he was gone. But the damage had already been done. I sat there in stunned silence, the dial tone humming faintly through the speaker. The beer was warm in my hand. The TV was still running, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Because all I could hear was his voice echoing in my head. "You left us. You owe me. You're my father." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. And for the first time in years, the past came knocking, and this time, it was kicking the door wide open. The name hung in the air long after the call ended. Michelle Evans. I hadn't heard her name in over 10 years. But the moment Aiden said it, something inside me buckled. Like a scab I'd ignored for too long had been ripped open, and the wound underneath was still raw. I leaned back on the couch, eyes fixed on nothing. The hum of the television faded into background noise as memories I'd buried clawed their way to the surface. It started with a smell. Lavender perfume, sweet, a little too strong. Hotel sheets. Her laughter behind closed doors, hushed and breathless. The flicker of cigarette ash by the window, even though she never admitted she smoked. I remembered the motel off I-35. Room 206. Always the same one. Cheap, quiet, no questions asked. I remembered how it started, how we started. I was still married to Melissa back then. Good woman. Loyal. Deserved the world, and I gave her excuses. I was too tired from work, too busy to talk, not ready to start a family. And when I couldn't give her what she needed, I looked elsewhere. I looked for something easier. Something temporary. Something I could walk away from. That something was Michelle. She wasn't complicated. She didn't ask questions. She didn't want forever. Or so I thought. I stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen. My face looked older than it had that night I walked into that motel for the first time. Back then, I told myself it was harmless. That Melissa would never know. That Michelle understood the deal. But the truth is, I lied to both of them. And now, 15 years later, it was catching up to me. I stood up slowly, pacing the room with heavy feet. I tried to think logically, to make it make sense. Michelle and I only saw each other for what, 2 years? Less? Could she have gotten pregnant? Would she have kept it? No. That didn't sound like her. Or maybe I just didn't know her as well as I thought. Another thought hit me, and it hit hard. If Aiden was around 15 now, the timing lined up. The last few months before Melissa left. The business trips I took too often. The ones that weren't really for business at all. My hands curled into fists at my sides. The guilt came rushing back, heavier than before. Melissa had asked once. Just once. "Are you seeing someone else, Brian?" And I lied. Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. She wanted a child. A future. I gave her distance and deception. And Michelle? Maybe she wanted more than I realized. Maybe she wanted to trap me, or maybe she thought I'd never be worth telling. Either way, she never said a word about a child. Not until now. Not until Aiden called, throwing my whole past back in my face like a bomb I didn't even know I was holding. I stopped pacing and leaned against the wall, one hand bracing myself as if the room was spinning. What did I even say to that kid, if he called again? Hey, sorry I didn't know you existed. Sorry I slept with your mom behind my wife's back and ghosted her when things got hard. Sorry if your entire life's been built on a lie. I hadn't even met him, and already, I felt like I'd failed him. But one thing kept rattling in my head louder than the rest. Michelle told him I left. She told him I abandoned him. That wasn't just a misunderstanding, that was a weapon. One she'd handed him and told him where to aim. And the part that scared me most? Maybe I did deserve it. Because whether or not he was my son, I sure as hell gave both those women a reason to hate me. The memories came in slow waves that night, whether I wanted them or not. Michelle's name had torn open a door I'd kept shut for years, but behind that door, it wasn't just her. It was Melissa too. If I was being honest, she was the one I thought about the most during quiet nights like this. The one I tried not to think about when the guilt got too loud. Back then, Melissa and I lived in a small brick house on the east side of Austin. Nothing fancy. Just a couple bedrooms, a backyard with more weeds than grass, and a little herb garden she tended like it was her escape. It should have been enough, for any man, really. But it wasn't for me. Not then. She had a softness to her. The kind of softness that made you feel safe. She believed in people, too much, sometimes. She believed in me. And I let her down. What started it all was a conversation over dinner. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet Tuesday evening, some overcooked chicken and mashed potatoes. She poured us each a glass of red wine, then smiled gently as she said, I was thinking, maybe we could start trying. I didn't even need to ask what she meant. We'd been married for 3 years. Long enough for her to start imagining parks and strollers, first birthdays, and late-night feedings. I, on the other hand, was imagining spreadsheets, sales calls, and how fast I could get back on the road. I remember nodding, forcing a smile, muttering something like, yeah, maybe soon. Work's just crazy right now. That became my line. Work's crazy. Let's wait. Maybe next year. It bought me time. And I thought time would fix everything. But Melissa wasn't stupid. Over the next few months, her smiles grew shorter. Her questions sharper. And the more she asked, the more I pulled away. I started staying late at the office, even when there wasn't any reason to. I took more road trips, extended the ones I didn't need to. I told myself it was necessary, that it was providing for us. But in truth, I just didn't want to be in that house. I didn't want to look her in the eyes and admit I was terrified of being a father. Terrified of screwing it all up. Terrified of giving a child the kind of broken man I was becoming. And then there was Michelle. She came into the picture like a shortcut out of everything I didn't want to face. She didn't ask about babies or bills. She didn't ask for anything, really, except for the parts of me I wasn't willing to give my own wife. Looking back, I don't think I loved Michelle. I think I loved the distraction. The guilt started to show in the cracks between conversations. Melissa would look at me just a beat too long. Ask me why my phone buzzed at night. Who I was meeting in Dallas when my office was in Houston. I lied. Of course I did. And then, one night, I walked into our bedroom and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, my phone in her hand. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with eyes that had stopped hoping. Who is she? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stood there like a boy caught cheating on a test, no defense, no explanation. Just shame. I wanted to lie. But the truth was written all over her face, she already knew. That night, she slept on the couch. And I never fought to bring her back. A week later, she packed her things. And I let her go. Not because I didn't love her. But because, deep down, I believed I didn't deserve her. Sleep never came that night. I lay on the couch with the TV still on, volume low, flickering shadows dancing across the walls like ghosts I'd tried too hard to forget. My eyes stayed wide open, locked on the ceiling, while my mind ran every possible timeline like a detective piecing together a crime scene. Could Aiden really be mine? I kept asking myself that, over and over, like repeating the question would somehow lead to a different answer. The math wasn't impossible. If he was 15, give or take, that would place his birth right in the middle of the last stretch of my marriage to Melissa, the stretch when I was seeing Michelle more often than I saw my own wife. I'd always convinced myself that what happened between Michelle and me was controlled, safe, and temporary. But was it really? Looking back now, I couldn't remember all the details with clarity. It had been so long. But that was the problem. How many things had I chosen to forget? My mind wandered back to those last few months before everything fell apart. Michelle had started acting different. Not clingy, not emotional, just oddly quiet. She wasn't the type to play emotional games, but I remember there was a shift. Less joking around. More watching me when I left. One morning, I remember slipping out of that motel room without saying goodbye. I had a meeting to get to. Or maybe I just didn't want the awkwardness of pretending it was more than what it was. I never asked if she was okay. I never noticed the way she looked down at her stomach when she thought I wasn't paying attention. That one memory came back like a jolt, her sitting on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a towel, staring into space. I asked if she was good, and she snapped out of it with a smile and said, "Just tired." But it wasn't tired. There was something else there, something heavy. I just didn't care enough to look. Then there was the time she canceled on me, said she was sick, didn't want to see anyone. That had never happened before. Michelle wasn't the type to back out, especially not when I was the one making the effort. I chalked it up to mood swings, maybe even that she was starting to catch feelings. I didn't dig deeper. I didn't want to. Now, sitting alone in a dark apartment with a stranger's voice still ringing in my head, I couldn't help but go back to every moment I brushed off. Every excuse I accepted. Every chance I had to ask real questions and chose not to. What if she had gotten pregnant? What if she told me, but I didn't listen? What if she didn't tell me, because she knew the kind of man I was back then? A man who wouldn't show up. A man who was already halfway out the door. Maybe it had been easier for her to just deal with it alone. Or maybe she'd been waiting for the day I'd come looking for them. Only I never did. I never even looked back. I sat up, palms against my knees, the weight of everything pressing down on me like concrete. My past wasn't just messy, it was rotten in places I hadn't dared to examine until now. And that phone call? It wasn't just some angry kid venting at a wrong number. It was the result of everything I'd done and refused to deal with. Aiden's voice was soaked in pain and betrayal. And no matter how much I wanted to tell myself he wasn't mine, I couldn't shake the idea that maybe he was. But it wasn't just about biology. It was about what I had done. To Melissa. To Michelle. Maybe even to Aiden. I stood up, pacing slowly through the apartment, running a hand over my face like I could wipe away the years. I needed answers. Real ones. Because if Michelle really had a child and had raised him believing I was some ghost of a man who vanished, then I owed him more than just denial. I owed him the truth. Hell, I owed it to myself too. And I had a gut feeling that the worst part wasn't what I remembered, it was what I didn't. The stuff I ignored, the moments I downplayed, the warnings I walked past with my eyes wide open. Something told me this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a reckoning. And it was coming fast. The next morning, after a night without sleep and too many unanswered questions circling my mind, I stared at Aiden's number on my call history for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, pulse tapping in my neck like a warning. I didn't know what I was going to say if he answered. I didn't even know what I wanted out of the conversation. But I knew one thing, I couldn't leave it where we left off. So I hit dial, brought the phone to my ear, and waited. 3 rings in, I was about to give up when he picked up, his voice low and flat, nothing like the fury from the night before. "What?" he said, and I could hear it, fatigue, maybe even hesitation, buried underneath the armor. I tried to steady my voice, to meet him somewhere human. Aiden, it's Brian. Look, I don't want to argue. I just want to understand what's going on. There was a pause, long enough for me to wonder if he'd hung up. Then, why now? You think I just need a chat with the guy who left us broke? I swallowed, not sure how much to defend myself or how much to just let him speak. I didn't know about you, I said carefully. That's not me dodging anything, that's just the truth. No one ever told me. Another pause, this one quieter. I thought he might laugh again, or yell. But instead, his voice came through smaller than I expected. She said you knew. She said you bailed when you found out she was pregnant and that's why she couldn't afford anything after. I closed my eyes and rubbed a hand across my jaw, guilt rising like bile. She never told me she was pregnant, I said. Not once. Not back then, not after. If she had, but the sentence didn't finish, because even I wasn't sure what would have happened. Aiden let out a breath on the other end, like he wanted to believe me but didn't know how. She's been saying the same thing for years. That you're a coward. That you owed us but ran off to live some perfect life somewhere else. My mouth went dry. I haven't had anything perfect, I said. I've made mistakes. A lot of them. But if I'd known, if I'd had even the smallest idea you existed, I wouldn't have disappeared. The line was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel hostile. It felt heavy. Like he was letting the words sit somewhere they'd never been allowed before. Then he said something that hit harder than anything else. I've been working since I was 14. Flipping burgers after school, handing my mom the check every Friday. She says it's to help out, says we're always behind. But it doesn't make sense. We're still broke. Still one step from lights getting shut off. His voice cracked just slightly, and that tiny fracture in his armor landed in my chest like a spear. She says it's your fault, he added. That if you'd paid what you owed, we wouldn't be living like this. My stomach turned. You give her everything? I asked. Every check? Yeah, he said. All of it. She says it's what men do when their dads bail. Step up. I didn't know what to say to that. The silence between us stretched thin, thick with tension and something else, a flicker of something like recognition. I didn't know if Aiden was mine. I didn't know if Michelle had lied to him or to me or to both of us. But I knew that this kid, this angry, tired, beat-down teenager, was carrying a weight no child should be asked to hold. I'm sorry, I said, finally. I don't know what your mom's told you, but I want to find out the truth. All of it. If you're willing to talk again, if you have questions. I'll be here. I won't hang up. He didn't say anything for a while. I could hear movement, maybe pacing. Then he said, voice lower now, you really didn't know about me? I swear to you, I said, and for the first time in years, I meant every syllable. I didn't know. The line stayed open, unspoken understanding flickering beneath the tension. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't hang up. Neither did I. We just sat there, two strangers sharing a silence that wasn't quite so empty anymore. The more I sat with Aiden's voice echoing in my head, the more I knew I couldn't just take Michelle's word, or even his, for anything. Something was off. It wasn't just the way he talked about money, about how broke they always were despite him handing over every paycheck. It was the language, the manipulation behind it. I'd heard it before. Years ago. Different tone, same playbook. The realization settled into my gut like a stone. She wasn't just lying to him, she was using him. Just like she used me. That same week, I made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Dave Kessler. He used to work in corporate security before shifting into freelance private investigations. The man had a talent for uncovering the rot people tried to hide. We weren't close, but we'd had a few late-night bar talks in our younger days, the kind where you admit things to someone just blurry enough not to remember. When he picked up, his voice was rough, same as I remembered, gravel coated in nicotine and coffee. "Mitchell," he said, sounding surprised. "Didn't think I'd hear from you again unless someone was blackmailing you or you lost your wallet in a strip club." "Close enough," I said, trying to manage a half-smile that didn't quite land. "I need you to look into someone." Quietly. "Name?" "Michelle Evans. Lives here in Austin. Or near it. Last I heard, she was in a rental near East Riverside. Might have moved since then." "You dating her?" he asked casually. "Worse," I said. "She might have had my kid. 15 years ago. I need to know what the hell she's been doing since." There was a long pause on his end. "That's heavy," he said finally. "You got a budget? Enough for you to be thorough. Give me a few days." He hung up without saying goodbye, which was just like him. For the rest of that week, I stayed busy. Or tried to. Every night, I came home from work and went through old emails, old calendars, anything I could dig up to piece together what I'd missed all those years ago. I found an old picture on my laptop, Michelle sitting on the passenger side of my car, legs crossed, smirking like she owned the world. That smirk had fooled me back then. Now, all I saw was control. Looking at her now, through the cracked lens of memory, I realized there had been signs. Little ones. The way she always needed a little help with something. The way she asked me to spot her cash for rent more than once, even though she claimed to work full-time at a law office that never answered the phone. And there was that one time she asked about my bank account. Not directly, but in that sideways way some people do when they want something without admitting it. I'd always brushed it off. I told myself she was just charming, just free-spirited. Truth was, she was always calculating. Always watching. When Dave finally called me back, it was on a Thursday afternoon. I answered before the first ring finished. "Got your dirt," he said flatly. "And there's plenty of it." I leaned forward on my desk, heart thudding. "Tell me." "Michelle hasn't had a job on record for over a year," he began. "Last W-2 she filed was from a gas station she got fired from for taking money out of the register. She's not working now. Not legally, anyway. So how's she surviving?" I asked, though I already had a guess. "That's where it gets worse," Dave said. "She's been hitting the local casinos hard. Weekly, sometimes 3 or 4 times. Always small-time joints, cash only. I got photos. And surveillance logs. She's dropping a couple hundred each visit, sometimes more." I went cold. "Where's she getting that kind of money?" "Your guess was right," he said. "From the kid. Traced ATM withdrawals near his work. Looks like she takes the cash straight from him. Kid's running like a damn ATM for her." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. Dave let the silence hang for a second. "You want the paperwork?" "Yeah," I said. "Email everything. Today." He did. An hour later, my inbox dinged with a folder full of receipts, photos, notes, and bank statements. I sat there and went through every line. The timestamps. The withdrawal amounts. Photos of her stumbling out of casinos in the middle of the night. Always alone. Always broke. Except for the money she kept taking. My stomach turned as it all sank in. She hadn't just been lying to me. She'd been siphoning that boy's future away $1 at a time, feeding a habit he didn't even know she had. And he was blaming me. Because she'd told him to. Because she knew I'd vanish and stay vanished. Because back then, I made disappearing look easy. I pushed the laptop away, rubbed my face, and whispered the only thing that made sense in that moment, the bitter truth I hadn't wanted to face. "She's using him," I said aloud. "Just like she used me." I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence in front of me left no room for doubt. Michelle was draining Aiden dry, just like she used to drain me, but this time, the damage was worse because it was aimed at a kid. A kid who still thought she was the only person in his corner. I couldn't shake the image of him handing over his hard-earned paychecks, trusting her because she was his mom, never realizing she was turning around and dropping that money into slot machines. The longer I sat with that thought, the more one name kept coming back to me, someone I hadn't thought about in years: Carolyn Evans. Michelle's mother. Back when I was seeing Michelle, I met Carolyn a handful of times. She was sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who saw through people fast. We never had much of a relationship, but I remembered one thing clearly: she didn't trust her own daughter. At the time, I thought it was just mother-daughter drama, the usual tension, but now I wondered if she'd seen things I missed. I dug through an old contact list I'd exported years ago, and by some miracle, her number was still the same. I hesitated before calling, unsure how she'd react after all these years. When she picked up, her voice was older but unmistakable. "Hello? Carolyn, it's Brian Mitchell." "I don't know if you remember me, Brian," she cut in flatly. "Michelle's Brian?" I winced at the possessive but didn't argue. "Yeah. Look, I wouldn't be calling unless it was important. It's about Aiden." Her tone changed instantly. "What about him?" I told her everything. The call from Aiden, the accusations, the private investigator, the casinos, the money. She didn't interrupt. Just listened in silence until I finished. When I did, there was a long pause before she spoke. "That poor boy," she said, voice tight. I knew something wasn't right. "Michelle cut me off when he was about 9. Said I was meddling. I tried sending him birthday cards, Christmas stuff. Never heard back." "She ever tell you about me?" I asked. "Only that you were a mistake she got over," Carolyn said. "She never mentioned a kid. Not once." "You think he's mine?" "Honestly," she sighed. "I don't know. Michelle was seeing someone else around that time too, but she was always cagey about names. Wouldn't surprise me if she just picked the guy who looked easiest to blame." That landed hard. "He thinks I abandoned him. Thinks it's my fault they're broke." "Of course he does," she snapped. "It's what she does. She rewrites reality to make herself the victim. Always has. And Aiden? He's just another chess piece in her game. Same as you were." "Then why call me?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because she's running out of options," Carolyn said coldly. "And she's desperate. She's probably drowning in debt, and now that the boy's almost grown, she's got to find a new villain to blame." I leaned back in the chair, phone still pressed tight to my ear. "I want to help him," I said. "But he doesn't trust me." "Why would he?" "Because he's still a kid," she said. "And kids, no matter how mad they are, want the truth. You give it to him, you don't lie, and maybe you get through. And if you're serious about helping, I'll do what I can on my end." "You'd talk to him?" "Hell yes, I'd talk to him. Someone has to. And it damn sure isn't going to be Michelle." For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel in the middle of all this: relief. Not much. But enough to breathe again. "Thanks, Carolyn," I said quietly. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "We've got work to do." 2 days after our call, Carolyn asked me to meet her in person. We picked a diner halfway between our neighborhoods, one of those old places with peeling leather booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since the 90s. She was already there when I arrived, a cup of decaf in front of her and a small manila folder by her side. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You want the truth?" she said as soon as I slid into the seat across from her. "Then buckle up, because Michelle's been spinning lies for years, and Aiden's stuck in the middle of it." I nodded, leaning in. "I need to know everything. No more missing pieces." Carolyn tapped the folder but didn't open it yet. Instead, she looked me square in the eyes. "Michelle got married. You didn't know that, did you?" My heart kicked hard against my ribs. "No." "When?" "About 15 years ago," she said. "Not long after she stopped seeing you, I imagine. Guy's name was Kyle Rutledge. Bit of a hothead, but he had a steady job. Seemed like he really cared about her at first. What happened? Aiden happened, she said. Michelle told him she was pregnant, said it was his. Kyle wasn't convinced. Said the math didn't add up, that the dates were off. They fought about it constantly. He stuck around until Aiden was about 3, then walked out. I sat back slowly, processing. So she told Aiden he left because of me? Worse, Carolyn said. She told Aiden you were his real father. Said Kyle wasn't man enough to stick around, and that you, the real dad, ran off before he was born. She didn't just make you the villain. She erased Kyle altogether. My chest tightened. Does Aiden even know about him? Doubt it. She probably told him Kyle was just some old roommate or a fling. She wanted to control the narrative, and what better way than blaming the guy who wasn't around to defend himself? Jesus, I muttered, running a hand over my face. And Aiden's been carrying all that? For years, Carolyn said. Thinking he's the product of 2 people who didn't want him. One who left before he was born and one who used him like a bank account. What do you think that does to a kid? I didn't have an answer. My mind was reeling. I remembered Aiden's voice, sharp, bitter, cracked at the edges with pain. That anger didn't come out of nowhere. It came from years of believing he'd been abandoned by everyone who was supposed to love him. Because Michelle had fed him that story. And I'd unknowingly played my part by staying gone. I should have known, I said quietly. I should have checked. Looked her up. Something. Carolyn softened just a little. You didn't know, she said. But now you do. So the question is, what are you going to do with it? I looked at the folder on the table. What's in there? A copy of the marriage certificate. A few old photos. Some records I pulled from a friend of mine who works for the county. Nothing too deep, but enough to prove she was lying. I opened the folder slowly, flipping through the contents. There she was, Michelle in a simple white dress, standing next to a tall man with sandy hair and suspicious eyes. And behind her smile, now that I really looked at it, I saw something brittle. Something calculated. He ever try to fight for custody? I asked. Not once, Carolyn said. I think he just wanted out. He suspected the kid wasn't his and didn't want to stick around to watch it play out. Michelle never pushed him. Why would she? She already had a backup plan, I closed the folder and exhaled, a long breath that felt like it had been sitting in my lungs for years. He deserves to know the truth, I said. All of it. Then you'd better be ready, Carolyn replied. Because once he hears it, there's no putting it back in the box. I nodded, staring down at the coffee I hadn't touched. I'm ready, I said. He's not just some lie I got dragged into. He's a kid who's been caught in a war he didn't start. The hardest part wasn't asking him. It was watching the way his face fell when I did. We sat in the parking lot of a burger joint after his shift, the car engine still running, silence filling the space between us like fog. Aiden looked out the passenger window, arms crossed, jaw tight. I could see the tension coiled in his shoulders, the way he clenched his fingers in his hoodie sleeves. He hadn't said a word since I picked him up. I finally cleared my throat, steadying myself before I spoke. Aiden. I think we need to do a DNA test. He flinched, just barely. So you don't believe me, he muttered. I believe you believe what your mom told you, I said carefully. But this isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about making sure we both know the truth. For real. No more guessing, no more stories. He didn't respond. Just kept staring through the windshield like the world outside made more sense than the one in the car. If I'm not your father, I added quietly, you deserve to know who is. And if I am, then I need to own that fully. Aiden finally turned to face me. His eyes were tired, but there was something else there too, fear. Not of the result. Of being wrong. Of being lied to again. You know how messed up it is to find out the guy you've hated your whole life might not even be yours to hate, he said. Yeah, I whispered. I do. He looked down at his hands, picked at a loose thread on his sleeve, then gave a small nod. Fine. Let's do it. We went to a clinic 2 days later. The process was simple: swab, signature, silence. Aiden didn't say much. Neither did I. The nurse tried to make small talk, but it fell flat in the stale room with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs. When it was over, they told us it would take 5 business days. The wait nearly killed me. Every hour that passed felt like another reminder of all the years I'd spent running from accountability, only to find myself now, desperate for it. At night, I sat in my apartment flipping through the documents Dave had sent, rereading his notes, looking at those pictures of Michelle outside the casino, trying to understand how a woman I once thought I could trust had built an entire lie around a child. But more than that, I thought about Aiden. The way he hesitated before speaking. The way he carried himself like someone twice his age. The way he never asked for help but clearly needed it. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years, this strange, aching sense of responsibility. It made no sense. For all I knew, I was just a name she'd thrown at him because I'd been convenient. For all I knew, I wasn't part of his blood. But in those days of waiting, I realized I wanted to be. Not because of guilt. Not because of some romantic notion of redemption. But because the kid deserved someone who wouldn't lie to him or use him or make him feel like a burden. He deserved a man who would show up and stay put. When the clinic finally called, I already knew. Something in me just knew. I picked up on the first ring, listened to the woman on the other end read the result, and felt my body go cold. 0% probability of paternity. Not 1%. Not a maybe. Not even close. I whispered a thank you, hung up, and just sat there, staring at the floor. All the air had gone out of the room. I called Aiden later that night, asked if we could meet. He didn't sound surprised. Yeah, he said. I figured you'd want to tell me in person. We met at the same diner where I'd first spoken to Carolyn. He walked in wearing the same black hoodie, his eyes more guarded than ever. I slid the envelope across the table, unopened. I know what it says, he mumbled, not touching it. I'm not yours. I nodded slowly. Biologically? No. You're not. He sat back, jaw clenched, eyes shining but refusing to blink. So this was all fake? The question didn't come out angry. It came out hollow. Empty in a way I wasn't ready for. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. No, I said. None of it was fake. The pain you felt? That was real. The lies she told you? Real. The way she's been using you? That's real too. He looked away, biting his bottom lip. But you're not even my dad, he whispered. Why are you still here? Because you called me, I said. You picked up the phone. You gave me a chance. And I'm not walking away from that just because a lab says we don't share blood. His voice was barely audible when he asked, then what are we? I exhaled, searching for the right words. Maybe we're just two people trying to fix a lie we didn't start. Maybe we're something new. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then he nodded slowly, tears slipping down without permission. I don't know what to do now. We figure it out, I said. Together. The rec center smelled like old gym mats and pine cleaner. Aiden sat beside me, his foot tapping an erratic rhythm on the scuffed linoleum floor. Carolyn stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes like a storm just waiting to break. The meeting room was empty except for us, a folding table in the middle and 4 chairs surrounding it. On that table sat a folder, stuffed with every photo, bank statement, and report Dave had sent. Everything we had. The truth, all in one place. The door creaked open, and Michelle walked in like she owned the place. Oversized sunglasses, chipped nail polish, and an expression that said she was already bored. She didn't acknowledge Carolyn. Barely looked at Aiden. But her eyes landed on me with a smile that didn't come close to touching her face. What's this? A reunion tour, she said, tossing her purse onto the table and sitting down like she had nothing to lose. You said it was about Aiden. It is, I said evenly, motioning for her to sit across from him. This is your chance to tell him the truth. Before someone else does. Michelle glanced at Aiden, then at the folder. Her eyes narrowed. What's all this? I didn't answer. I just opened it and slid the contents across the table, casino photos, ATM withdrawals, a breakdown of Aiden's wages, all leading directly to her spending patterns. Michelle's face didn't change at first. She stared at the papers, blinked once, then gave a breathy little laugh. This is what this is about, she scoffed. You hired some creep to follow me around? Answer the damn question, Carolyn snapped. Where's the money, Michelle? What money? She said, shrugging. We've been struggling. Aiden helps out, that's what families do. This whole thing is ridiculous. You were gambling with his paycheck, I said. We have photos. Receipts. You've been taking money from him since he was 14. Michelle rolled her eyes, leaning back in her chair. So what? He lives in my house. I feed him. I raised him without a dime from you. You didn't raise him, Carolyn cut in, stepping closer. You used him. You made him believe his life was broken because someone else walked away, when all along it was you. You created this mess. Oh, please, Michelle snapped. You don't know what it's like to do this on your own. You weren't on your own, Carolyn barked. You had help. You had choices. And instead of stepping up, you built a damn fantasy. You lied to this boy his entire life and used Brian's name as your personal excuse for every bad decision you made. Michelle's voice rose. You think this was easy? You think raising a kid alone was some dream of mine? Kyle walked out. Brian disappeared. What was I supposed to do, huh? Just smile and work 2 jobs and thank the universe for giving me a kid nobody wanted? You don't get to say that, Aiden said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. Everyone went silent. He hadn't spoken since she walked in. Now he was staring straight at her, eyes red but steady. You don't get to say nobody wanted me. Michelle froze. Sweetheart, I didn't mean, stop, he said. Just stop. He looked down at the papers, then back at her. You said Dad left. You said he didn't care. You said everything was his fault. But none of that's true, is it? I did what I had to do, Michelle muttered. You lied to me. I protected you, she snapped back, panic beginning to thread through her words. I gave you something to believe in. You needed to hate someone, so you gave me a target, he said. You built my life around a lie so I wouldn't see the truth, that it was you. You took my money. You made me think I was worthless. And you called that protection? Michelle's shoulders dropped. Her face twisted, not into guilt, but something closer to resentment. I didn't ask for any of this, she said. I didn't ask to be a mom. You think I had a choice? Carolyn stepped forward, fire in her voice. You did have a choice. And you chose yourself. Every time. And now this boy, this young man, is sitting here trying to make sense of years you took from him. You don't get to play the victim anymore, Michelle. That ends today. Michelle stood up fast, grabbing her purse like she might walk out, but Aiden didn't flinch. He just looked at her one last time and asked, "Who's my real father?" The silence was deafening. Michelle's lips parted, then closed again. I don't know, she said finally. And then she left. No apology. No remorse. Just the sound of her heels echoing down the hall until the door slammed shut behind her. Aiden sat in stunned silence, his breath shallow, eyes locked on the door she walked out of. I wanted to say something. Anything. But there was nothing that could touch that moment, nothing that could soften the reality he'd just been handed. So I didn't speak. I just stayed with him. And this time, I wasn't going anywhere.